Hello everyone and welcome to Elizabeth Bishop's The Fish screencast, of course created by myself, Jigon Tite. In this video we are going to hear and see a short summary of Bishop's life and of course the analysis of the poem. Now before looking at her life, I would like to point out that you do need to know about her lifestyle and of course her life. However, you should never write too much about it and just kind of briefly mention it where you feel it's needed. Also, if you haven't watched Approaching Poetry screencast, now would be a good time to do so. So let's begin. Okay, so Elizabeth Bishop is an American poet who was born in 1911 in Massachusetts, United States. Now there's a map here on the screen for you to show where exactly this place is. Okay, now what you need to know about Bishop's is that she had a very difficult life. Okay, her father died when she was only 8 months old, and as a result of her father's death, her mother's health deteriorated and she was placed in a mental hospital. That is Bishop's mother, not Bishop herself. Okay, Elizabeth Bishop was raised by many, and she didn't really have a permanent home, and therefore she had a very unsettled life. Okay. Later in life, Bishop suffered from depression and turned to alcohol. She was also homosexual and discovered this in college. Obviously, this was a very difficult time in America, as really wasn't a place where you could explore your sexuality at that time. So, of course, that didn't really help her as well. She traveled a lot, but eventually returned from her travels and later died at the age of 68 in 1979. Now, I've included a picture of Bishop. There she is on a postmark. Okay, now as always, I would like you to, as always, I have a mini activity for you which I feel will allow you to remember and perhaps understand the poem a little bit better. So what I would like you to do is to read the poem several times and sketch how you imagine the fish to look. Okay, I would only want you to read the poem. It's on the screen for you. Okay, now you don't have to be the best artist to do this. You just have to give it a try. You can use a pencil, you can use a pen, and you can just briefly sketch it, but I do want you to read it several times and then try and imagine what the fish would look like. Okay, press pause, and once you've done that, of course, press play, and we'll continue with our screencast. Okay, so I'm going to give you a couple of minutes, and then we will continue with the screencast. Welcome back. Now that you have a picture of the fish that Bishop caught, we're going to move on to slime. Okay, that is, we're going to try to analyze the structure, language, imagery, meaning, and effect of this particular poem. Okay. If you would really like to challenge yourself, which of course I think is very good, or if you are an A student, okay, somebody who gets really high grades, then I think it's really important for you then to pause the screencast, slime it yourself, okay, and then continue to watch the rest of the video and kind of check your answers. I think that is a very good idea. If you, however, feel I'm not really sure what sliming means, I haven't really watched the Approaching Poetry screencast, then of course we're going to do this together and you can do it. You can challenge yourself another time. Okay, so let's look at structure. Okay, and of course form is, we include form in structure as well. We know that it's written in free verse. How do we know this? Well, it has no set rhyme scheme. Okay, none of the words rhyme with one another, and of course there is no meter, there's no iambic pentameter, there's no iambic tetrameter, so therefore it is free flowing, and it's free verse. Okay, all of it is also written in one stanza. Now remember, sometimes you need to analyze why that could be. Okay, in the exam you don't just say it's written in one stanza. You of course need to say it is written in one stanza because the author tried to do ... Okay, you have to analyze author's choices. So why you would think the author would choose to write everything in one stanza or perhaps have no rhyme scheme. Now I think, personally, I think perhaps it is written in one stanza because the author's experience has gone by very quickly. Okay, there are no pauses between the stanzas and therefore you kind of read it quicker. Okay, so that means that all this experience lasted perhaps for a minute or two, so it didn't go on, even though the poem is quite long and you might feel, wow, okay, this has been going for a very long time. It really couldn't, okay, because the fish couldn't be breathing, as she says, the terrible oxygen for that long. So really she just wanted to kind of obviously have as much detail as possible, but obviously when you read it, you kind of read it quicker. Okay, so that's really the structure. Now we're going to move on to the language devices that, of course, this poem contains. Now, of course, I have a little tip for you as well, which says that you should always analyze why the author has used the language device. Never just say, oh, there's a metaphor used. Okay, always state why you think the metaphor is used, what does it create, and of course, later look at the effect as well. So, of course, this poem has a numerous amount of devices. However, I think I'm going to look at some of them that I think are very important, and you should actually look at these in your exam. Okay, so first of all, I think something's really important is the short lines. Okay, perhaps the short lines indicate that Bishop is surprised that he didn't fight, or perhaps it might indicate the fish's defeat. Okay, he didn't fight. It's just a short line within the poem, which might indicate his, kind of defeat of the fish, or Bishop's surprise that although it is a tremendous fish, it didn't really put up a fight. Okay. Another thing I think is very important is the similes that are used within the poem. Okay, his brown skin hung in strips like ancient wallpaper. Okay, it's not a very pleasant picture of the fish that she paints. However, she's not being romantic about it. She's being honest. The fish is old. The fish isn't pretty looking. The fish is kind of deteriorating before her eyes. Okay, but she uses a lot of similes to portray that actually the fish isn't pretty. Okay, okay. Of course, there are many similes throughout the poem itself. So, for example, packed like feathers, okay, and the pink swim bladder like a big peony, okay. So she kind of compares a lot of pretty things to the fish, where we know the fish isn't very pretty, okay. So another couple of devices that I think are very important is, first of all, the personification of the fish. Okay, I admire his sullen face. Okay, obviously the fish, she might imagine the fish to be upset over something, but really we know that fish doesn't really have a human like emotion, so therefore why would he have a sullen face? So I think that's something that you should definitely think about exploring further. Okay. Then I also like the use of I stared and stared, which of course is repetition. So I would like you to think, why does the author keep using the word stared so much? I stared and stared. Perhaps she cannot look away from the fish. She's so amazed and she keeps looking at this horrendous, massive fish that she has caught. Okay, so I think that's something important that you need to explore. Okay, and she says victory filled up the little rented boat. Okay, of course victory isn't something that you can just pour into the boat, so therefore it is metaphor, okay, that she uses to show how excited and how happy she is at that particular moment. Of course there are many different devices within the poem again. So for example, rainbow 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 with exclamation marks, so therefore you could say that she once again it's repetition, and once again it's kind of excitement because of the use of exclamation mark there as well. Okay, so we're going to move to the meaning, okay, or sorry, the imagery of this particular poem. Now remember a few moments ago I asked you to sketch the fish and only look at the words in the poem. If you've done that, then you've kind of did half of the battle. Okay, did you look at adjectives in order to draw it? If you did, then that's really imagery. Okay, when you look in the poem, we don't say adjectives, we say imagery, because really the adjectives that are there, technically they're adjectives because they're describing the fish or describing how she's feeling. But really we call them imagery because they all paint a bigger picture, okay? They make us imagine something. So for example, I have a couple of instances of imagery in the poem, and of course there are many, and in the exam you have to kind of look at them and explain what they create. So for example, tremendous. Okay, that's of course explaining how the fish, okay, explaining what the fish looks like, battered, homely, coarse, white. Okay, so therefore if you see any adjectives or adverbs in the poem, that is called imagery. And all of these little adjectives that are there are used to kind of create and show her experience of catching the fish, and of course releasing it back into the pond or the lake. Okay, so all of these create the bigger picture of her experience, and of course show the reader the fish. Okay, because you can actually, if you read the poem a couple of times, you could really begin to imagine what the fish looked like. So moving on to the meaning, and really in a nutshell, okay, meaning means a summary. Okay, remember in the exam it should only take you a couple of minutes to do this, so don't spend too much time on it. So really what happens in the poem is the poet is fishing and catches a humongous fish or tremendous fish. She holds it beside her boat and inspects it. Okay, Bishop looks at a lot of details of the fish, so for example the body, the gills. She imagines the pink swim bladder. Okay, and she also notices the 5 hooks in the fish's jaw. Okay. Of course, when you see the 5 hooks, okay, that the fish obviously escaped, so the fish wasn't going to be caught 5 times. However, the fish escaped that, so then she kind of feels that as if the fish is extraordinary, or perhaps the fish is a fighter, so therefore she doesn't really deserve to kill it. Okay, she doesn't really deserve to kill it, perhaps cook it for dinner. We don't really know what her intentions were, so she kind of feels that he deserves to live, and therefore she releases the fish. But before that, before she frees the fish, she notices the oil that has spilled in her boat. And of course, as we know, if you spill some oil over some water, you can see the colors that run through it. So therefore she sees it and compares it to a rainbow, and that's what she exclaims, rainbow, rainbow, rainbow. Okay, so indicating that she's in a kind of joyous mood. And then she releases the fish. Perhaps she thinks it's a sign. Okay, we don't really know. Okay, so that's really what this long poem is about. Okay, and lastly, we reached the effect. Okay, remember to pick a few phrases, but make sure that they have devices in them, and then explain why the device is used and how it makes you feel. Okay, when I'm teaching this poem, I know that a lot of students think that this isn't the best poem, or they don't really like it. And yes, perhaps nothing really happens in the poem, it's just about description of the fish. But think about how much Bishop describes the fish, how much detail she puts in. Okay, so really, when you're looking at this poem, pick several phrases. Okay, think about the devices that are included, and then think about how does it make you feel. So for example, I've included something. We saw the fish's jaw is weapon-like. Okay, it is a metaphor, and therefore the metaphor that is used here could make you feel as if the fish is a dangerous being, and thus the poet should get rid of it or let it go. Okay, now that is a good effect, because it makes us feel as if the fish is dangerous. And of course, the device is used is the metaphor. Okay, so you could, for example, pick any other phrase, tremendous fish. You could say that you feel ecstatic, that you're excited to see what this tremendous fish is going to do. So really just think of a good effect that of course would link in with the device that is being used. Okay, we could say that imagery is used when the author describes the fish as tremendous, and therefore it makes the reader feel whatever you think is accurate. Okay, so we reached the end of the video, and I do hope that you enjoyed it. So before we finish, I would like you to say out loud, or if you're shy you can write it down, so what you've revised or learned from this screencast. Okay, I'm sure there's something that you've learned or revised, because you might be revising for your exams, or perhaps you didn't really understand the poem in great detail. Okay, so just say it out loud or write it down. It doesn't really make a difference. And as always, don't forget to check out my blog at gigontite.wordpress.com for obviously more exciting things. Okay, so bye, and of course, best of luck.